Okay, my outstanding friends, it's Roger once again, and I have a little more research on the light acceleration experiments and the photons concussing and dividing. Now, at first, I thought it was strictly the Venturi that was causing this effect, but I discovered that it's not just, well, I think I discovered anyway, that it's not just the Venturi, it's the pulses. And pulses create, just like AC power, it's extremely violent reaction, AC versus DC. DC would just be like a regular wave of light coming through. Pulse red laser, bam, bam, bam. So when it explodes back, it hits it again like much harder than it would have if it was just hitting all by itself. It's a little bit hard to understand the concept, but it's a pulsation of an explosion back and a bang, an explosion back and another bang. So it's not only pushing its way through, it's got to push against what's pushing back at it. That's why you get this intense glow. You don't see these light waves, but they are complete waves. They're just like these over here. But you would never even see them until they are so concussed, but they're concussed backwards. This is called reverse EMF, electromotive force, reverse. It's supposed to be going this way. Well, in a concussion, it goes backwards. And that's what happens in static electricity and so forth. We had a hell of a problem with this back in the 70s and 80s with the original electronic equipment. They were picking up reverse electromagnetic forces that you'd static, you'd touch something on a frame of whatever the device was, and the whole thing would pulse like this, and it would shoot back through the circuits and cause, the program to disrupt. What a problem we had with that. I could tell you a funny story. I think I will tell you because it was hilarious. We put in one of the biggest grocery stores in Connecticut, and this was the first set of equipment to come out. Almost really literally, basically the first electronic cash registers that were being sold. And it was a big grocery store. It had 7 lanes. That was big back then. And I get a call after we put the equipment in. We had it all tested out. Everything was fine. We put it out there, and I get a call, and they say machine number 4 just blew the program. What would do is on the screen it would come up and say re-enter, and you go out and nothing you could do, and you find out the program was blown. So I go out and I set the machine back up. I said, okay, see what happens. I don't know what happened. I says no idea. So a couple hours later, I get a call. Machine 2 is down. I said, what the hell is going on? Machine 6 down or 2 is down now? And so I go out and I look at that same thing. And I can't figure out what's going on. I said, I'm looking at the power. I'm checking the outlets. I said, you got to have a problem here with your power. Something's going wrong here. You're not grounded or something's wrong. Well, everything was fine. So a couple hours later, machine 3 is down. I said, wow, whoa. So I get out there and I said, all right, let's start from the scratch. Who was running the machine? What did you do? And the girl comes over, and she looks like a prima donna. I mean, back then, this was in the 70s. They went out. They were looking pretty fancy when they were running cash registers. She was looking pretty hot. So I said, all right, what did you do? She said, I was just ringing the cash register. And I said, well, she told me what you did. She says, yeah, I was ringing the cash register. Well, everything was fine. So I'm thinking, what the heck could she do? So I said, I realized that she's got on like high heels or some kind of shoes that she was carrying around a rug with her. It was a nylon rug. And she would put it under her feet where at cash register she was working on. And she was the one every time would blow the machine up. So when I realized she was the only one that was affecting the machines, I said, okay, and I realized she had a nylon rug she was carrying around with her, and she had like leather shoes or something, and she's charging herself up with static, and then she touched the key, and pow, the machine would explode. Basically, in the memory, it would just literally explode. It wouldn't cause damage, but it would scramble the program. So I said, well, I understand what's going on now. You are charged up with electricity. She says, yeah, I touch things and I get little sparks. And I said, aha, boom. So this is kind of funny. So I said, well, you got, looks like you got silk on. She says, yeah, I wear silk and all this stuff. And, nylons and all kinds of things. Back then they were pretty fancy looking, when they were out in public. So after that, every time I would go out, I'd say, if anybody going to be running machines, I got to check all the women for silk underwear and make sure, we don't have anybody exploding the machines. Back now you'd be probably put in jail for that. I'm just going to show you this real quick. I was a field engineering manager for Victor Business Products, which they were worldwide. And at this point, they had just been bought out by Walter Kidder Corporation. But prior to that, they were a big global company, just almost like NCR, IBM, virtually the same sort of company. They were headquartered out of Chicago, and I was a Connecticut branch manager for the field engineering, and this was back in '79, and the Eastern region finished with 105% of quota for the year. We were the #1 region in the world. Roger Spurter's Connecticut Yankees finished the last quarter with a combined quota profit objective astounding 360%. Almost all of the profit was from my branch. So, this was what I did my whole life. And when these machines were exploding, nobody knew how to fix them. I figured out how to fix them. We created capacitance, a reactive capacitance circuit to absorb that discharge without affecting. There's a lot of things. There was diodes and capacitance and resistance, all kinds of things we had to add in there to the circuits. But it stopped that reverse EMF. And so that was my background. So maybe that added a little credence to the things I'm talking about. But I had more fun doing this than you could possibly imagine. It was just exciting. Every day was like Christmas. I got to tell you the truth. When we first got into machines, I was the first one. They sent them up to Connecticut to me because that was my background, and they knew that I was able to work with what they were going to send. Well, they sent all these machines up. We set them all up, tested them all out in the shop. Everybody took them home at night. We're going to deliver them the next day to these offices all around the country, all around Connecticut, and they did. And they all blew up. So why they blew up was because it was a cold, cold day. And they all took them and put them in their cars, and they went home at night. And the next morning, they delivered them. They brought them in. They were cold. They plugged them in, and they instantly exploded. And what happened was the chips, the circuit chips now, they run on 5 volts. All right, 5 volts is just not a whole lot of pressure. Back then, the first chips they made, they didn't realize it. They were doing them in laboratory settings. They had them set for 17 volts. 17 volts was just way too much voltage for these little tiny circuits. And when it's cold, there's so much additional flow of electricity, the chips would literally explode. I mean, I'm not kidding you. The top of the chip would blow right off. So I had all the equipment back then so I could do the testing. And I found out that at 70 degrees, you would get, let's say, 1/10 of an amp. But when we brought them down to 35 degrees, we would get like 3 amps. It's because all of the electrons are leaving. With cold is nothing but a decrease of electrons. The more electrons leave, the colder it gets. If you get to absolute zero, you have absolutely 0 extra electrons. And the electrons will superconduct. They will just flow, like cascade in there as fast as they can possibly go. That's what superconduction is. But instantaneously, it will start to oppose back because they're filling up with electrons, and now they're pushing back. That's what superconductivity is. That's why they can't continue it, because they can't keep it at that temperature without using more energy to keep it down at that temperature, if that makes any sense to you. But I could see on my oscilloscope that we were up here at 35 degrees. And we were down here like a quarter of a whatever at 70 degrees. And the only possible situation was that there was an excess of electrons flooding in when you get hotter. The hotter it gets, the more electrons go in. And believe it or not, the hotter it gets, the more electrons go in, and it actually makes things heavier. The only thing that gets lighter is gases. And I mentioned this the other day about going to the weights and measures, because I had to go up there every now and then and get our weights calibrated, because we had weights that had to be used in trade, they had to be sealed and all of that stuff and be exactly precise. And when I went up there, again, it was a cold day. I brought the weights in. I said, "Can you test them?" He said, "No, you got to leave them here until they get to room temperature." And he didn't know why either, but he says, "We just know that they don't weigh correctly until you leave them here, and they're the same temperature as everything else." And that was 40 years ago. And I, at that point, I was a little confused. I said, "How could that possibly be?" And he said what he thought was that the air wouldn't settle down inside because of the cold. You know how cold falls out of your refrigerator and stuff. And that's what he said. He said they really didn't know. They had no idea, but they knew they didn't weigh right. So it's now completely obvious that it's the excess of electrons that creates the weight, and it creates heat. Heat and weight are the same thing, but only heat in gases expands it. That's why they go up. In your stones and rocks and pieces of steel and so forth, you're just forcing extra electricity in there, and extra electrons, and they get warmer and warmer and warmer. They don't grow bigger and bigger and bigger. They just get more excited inside. They just forced in there, and they're trying to push their weight back out, and they will. They'll come back out when they find a cooler area. But what's hotter and hotter and hotter, they just keep going that way. If it gets cooler out here, they come back. Simple as that. Okay, my friends, I was going to get long on this and show deep, which I will, but not in this video. I had too much fun. Now, this is what I am proposing, is to have a laser pulsed, creating this extremely high energy here, which should increase the energetic value from 5 watts to 1,000. That's 200 times increase, and which is what they say, not my words. We should be able to harvest it here with this new materials that they're working with now, Perscovites. I'm going to show you. And then just send it down to some storage device, and then send it out through whatever device we need to run cars and house and heaters and floodlights and whatever you want. And then you would need a floating ground in this thing. You could ground it to ground if it was in the house, and because then you would have a good solid ground. But you don't need a regular ground. There's what's called a floating ground, which means if I had all this stuff built into a device like this and carried it around, I would need it grounded, but you'd ground it to the case. But that gives you a little bit of, you just got to be careful that it's built right so that it doesn't short out, and then the electricity go through you to ground if you were holding it, because it's not grounded really. It's grounded internally. That's what's called a floating ground. A normal ground is if this was wired right down to the earth, and that wire would do nothing whatsoever unless something shorted out here and caused the electricity to go into this box. So instead of it going through my hand down to the earth, it would go through the wire that was attached to here to the earth, because it takes the least path of resistance. That's right to ground. So it wouldn't hurt me. Now, you could, this is not dangerous at all. There's a lot of devices you buy, they only have 2 prongs in the cords. If it has 2 prongs in the cords, it's not grounded. It's an ungrounded wire. It's a floating ground. You have to have that 3rd wire going to earth ground. Earth will suck in every electron you can give it. It'll just suck them up just like a sponge. And that's the least path of resistance, is earth ground. All right, so don't forget, this is my goal, is to have free power. And we need to create a very, very efficient solar cell. And this is the new compounds they're using to do this. You see right here, introduction, these Perscovite materials have emerged as the most promising, efficient, low-cost energy materials for various optoelectronic and photonic device applications. Exactly what we're doing. Now, the unique physical properties of these materials, Perscovites, such as high absorption coefficient, it sucks a lot of electrons in, long-range ambipolar charge transport, low exciton binding energy, high dielectric constant, ferroelectric properties, etc. It's got every property that we need. They have gained a huge interest in these materials for optoelectronic and photovoltaic applications. Photovoltaic is what we're going to be working with because we want to create electricity from photons. So this is going to be the next video is going to be on Perscovites, and we're going to be watching a video all about these cells and how they can layer them and how they work and all the new materials and where these materials are found. And this is all pretty new stuff. So we're going to be looking into it. It's going to be fun, but today won't be the day. All right, I love you all, and let's get some free energy. Let's get some free energy. I don't think this is a big deal. Every one of these components is sitting on a shelf right now. It's just all ready to go. You just put it together and get a couple of engineers to do this. They're spending billions and billions of dollars down a Fermi lab, walking around in circles for 10 years or more. I can't imagine how much money they spent doing. Well, anyway, this is the solution to the world's problems right now. This is the only possible way I can see out of. We're destroying the environment. People have no place even to live. Resources are getting really strained, and everything is based around the production of energy, and there it is for free.